Late one cold November evening, a man walked into the dim glow of a street lamp. His name was Mark Carney, and he wasn't just any passerby. What happened next would leave witnesses stunned, spark debates across social media, and shine a light on something most people choose to ignore every day. You see, under that flickering light sat Sarah Collins, a homeless veteran who once wore her country's uniform with pride, but now called a tattered blanket and a piece of cardboard home. Mark didn't know her story when he first approached her. All he saw was someone sitting alone in the biting wind, clutching a cup meant for spare change. But what he did next, it changed everything for both of them. Sarah had been living on the streets for nearly 3 years. She served 2 tours overseas before injuries forced her out of the military. When she came back home, things weren't as they should have been. Her marriage fell apart. The job she thought would carry her through never materialized. And somewhere along the way, she lost hope. Mark Carney, on the other hand, wasn't extraordinary by any stretch of the imagination. He worked at a local car dealership during the week and spent weekends fishing or fixing up his old truck. To anyone watching, he seemed like your average guy trying to get by. But there was something about him, something no one could quite put their finger on until that night. It started with a simple decision. Mark had stopped at an ATM near the park where Sarah often stayed. As he turned to leave, he noticed her huddled against the wall. At first he hesitated. Like many others, he'd grown used to seeing people like her on street corners and sidewalks, people you pass without really looking at. But then something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the way she pulled her jacket tighter around herself, as if bracing against more than just the cold. Or maybe it was the look in her eyes, a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Whatever it was, Mark couldn't walk away. Instead of dropping a few coins into her cup like most people might do, Mark crouched down beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you okay?" Sarah glanced up, surprised. Most folks avoided eye contact altogether. "Yeah," she muttered, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm Mark," he introduced himself. "Do you mind if I sit with you for a minute?" She shrugged, clearly unsure why this stranger wanted anything to do with her. Still, she nodded slightly, and Mark lowered himself onto the curb next to her. For a while, they sat in silence. Then slowly he began asking questions, not prying ones, but gentle ones. Where was she from? Did she have family nearby? How long had she been out here? At first, Sarah answered cautiously, but as the minutes ticked by, she found herself opening up. She told him about her time in the service, how proud she'd felt wearing the uniform, about coming home injured and struggling to adjust, about losing her apartment after months of medical bills piled up. Mark listened intently, nodding occasionally, but mostly letting her talk. Something about the way he looked at her without pity, without judgment, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. When she finished, Mark stood up. "Wait here," he said firmly. "I'll be right back." Sarah watched him walk off, wondering if she'd made a mistake trusting him. Strangers didn't usually stick around once they heard her story. They gave her money, sure, or offered empty promises of help, but staying, that was rare. 10 minutes later, Mark returned carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and a brown paper bag. He handed one cup to Sarah and set the bag between them. Inside were sandwiches, chips, and even a chocolate bar. "You must be freezing," he said, unwrapping his scarf and draping it over her shoulders. This small act of kindness caught her off guard. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. No sense showing weakness, she thought, not even to someone kind enough to share his warmth. But Mark wasn't done yet. Over the next hour, he asked more questions, learning not just about her past, but also about her dreams for the future. By the time they parted ways that night, he knew 2 things for certain. First, Sarah deserved better than the life she'd been dealt. Second, he intended to do something about it. The following morning, Mark woke up early and drove straight to the Veterans Affairs office downtown. He explained Sarah's situation to the staff, insisting they find a way to help her. At first, they were hesitant. Paperwork needed to be filed, approvals granted, resources allocated, all things that took time. But Mark refused to take no for an answer. He called city council members, reached out to local shelters, and even contacted news outlets to raise awareness about veterans struggling with homelessness. Within days, Sarah's story spread across the community. Donations poured in, offers of housing and employment flooded the VA office. Meanwhile, Mark visited Sarah daily, bringing food, fresh clothes, and updates on his efforts. Each visit bolstered her spirits, reminding her that she wasn't invisible anymore. Finally, after weeks of relentless advocacy, Mark received the call he'd been waiting for. A temporary apartment had been secured for Sarah, along with access to counseling services and job training programs. When he broke the news to her, she burst into tears, not because she was sad, but because for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe things could get better. Today, Sarah lives in her own place, a cozy studio apartment decorated with photos of her time in the service and mementos gifted by friends she's made along the way. She works part-time at a nonprofit helping other veterans transition back to civilian life. And every Sunday, she meets Mark for coffee to catch up and thank him again for changing her life. As for Mark, he insists he didn't do anything special. Anyone could have done what I did, he says, whenever someone praises him. But deep down, we all know that's not true. Sometimes, it takes just one person to step forward and make a difference. So here's the question: what will you do the next time you see someone in need? Will you walk past them, or will you stop, listen, and maybe change a life forever? Stay tuned for more stories like this, where ordinary people do extraordinary things. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out, and let me know in the comments, what's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you?